Hi folks, this video is for my Piano 2 classes in the spring semester 2021, and I wanted to record this video to share a couple things with you before our class meetings next week. So I know right now clearly we're in the middle of more ice and snow, but I'm hoping by the end of this week that this is all behind us and maybe we can meet on a more regular schedule next week and for the remainder of the semester. So in advance of that, I want to share some things with you about your first playing exam. Some of you had submitted videos last week, and I wanted to make some recommendations about things before we do further video exam submissions and some things that I can help you troubleshoot. For example, if you see the way this video is set up right now with the camera angle and me seated at the piano, you can both see my face, you know that it's me in the video, and then you can also see my hands on the keyboard moving up and down. This is the angle that I'd like for you to take when you submit your exam videos, particularly when you're doing your scales, because I need to be able to see what your scale fingerings look like at the piano to know whether you're doing them correctly or not. So with your scales, as a reminder, this semester in Piano 2 we're doing all major scales, and we do them with hands together and we do them 2 octaves. So a couple of you for your C major scale for the first exam of the semester, you sent me a video where you maybe did 1 octave up and back down, or maybe you did 1 hand at a time, but what I need is both hands going up and down 2 octaves. And I know maybe from your camera angle you can't see every one of my notes and fingerings, but 2 octaves up and down with both hands. So I can make sure that your notes and your fingerings are right. And for future reference, when we test over scales in the piano proficiency exam, that's how we'll do majors. 2 octaves, both hands together at the same time. And lastly, just very briefly, for your cadence chords, make sure that those scale handouts that I'm sending you via email, that you're looking at the bottom line on those handouts to see the correct voicings and shapes for those left-hand cadence chords. So when we test over those, what I'll ask you to do is to just play that sequence, like in C major, for example. The 1 chord, the 4 chord in that inversion, the 1 chord, the 5/7 in that inversion, and then back to tonic C major. Now some of you for the 5/7 are doing different voicings, like maybe this is something you may have done in a previous section of class piano, or some of you also are doing things like this, where you're playing the chords all in root position, and you're hopping all the way up and down in different directions from C major. And I really do want you to use these voicings that are on the bottom of the scale sheet. And the most practical reason for me to insist on that would be when we do these right-hand melodies to harmonize, like Pop Goes the Weasel, if you're conditioned to play those chords in those shapes, you don't have to look to aim if you have to relocate your hand, because everything will be right there close. And if you do these in the same shapes in every key that we encounter throughout this semester, then there will be this association that develops between seeing the Roman numeral, thinking about what the notes are, and going to that shape in your left hand. So please get used to using those shapes in every scale that we do. The bottom line on those scale handouts, that's what you want for your cadence chords. So for our next playing exam, this will be in a couple weeks from now, I want to show you what will be the things on our playing exam after I get your submissions for G major and D major scale and cadence chords this week. So if you have your textbook and you want to look at page 94, we're going to start by looking at a couple of examples in your textbook of right-hand melodies to harmonize in these most recent keys. So we've just done G major and D major scales and cadence chords. And so if you look at the top example on page 94, you see here a very short melody in the right hand that is in D major and will harmonize with left-hand chords. So first things first, when you see your chord symbols on this exercise, top of page 94, notice that you don't see Roman numerals. What you see instead are chord symbols. You just see D, or G, or A. But in the key of D, those are your 1, 4, and 5/7 chords. So when you see D, think Roman numeral 1, major 1. When you see G, the last measure on the top line, play D on the bottom, D, G, and B, so that that 4 chord is voiced in that inversion, just like in your cadence chord sequence. That is the 4. And then when you see A, for those couple of times on the bottom line, think C sharp, G, A from the bottom up. That is your 5/7 in this key. So that when you play both hands together, here's what it should sound like. Now, some of you will recognize this melody. It doesn't have a title on it, but it may seem familiar to some of you. Play your left hand twice per bar, starting at the first complete measure. It should sound with both hands together like this. Like so. And from the beginning when I started until the last measure, my left hand played 2 chords per measure. So think of your left hand as just playing half note chords and sustaining them twice per bar. Now, I'd like for you to start looking at the notes and the left hand chords for this one. When we meet together in class next week, we'll talk about what the fingerings should look like for your right hand melody. And the same for this other exercise that we'll look at in your textbook if you turn over to page 120. So the first exercise I just showed you was in D major. This one at the bottom half of page 120 is in G. And again, I'm not going to play this for you, but this is going to be a melody that would be really familiar. I am very confident that everybody in class will know this melody when you start to feel through it at the piano. And you don't see any chord symbols here at all, not lead sheet style, not Roman numerals, nothing for the left hand. And so this is when you have to go through and say, okay, that first measure, we're in G major. The first note there is a G. So that G is present in the 1 chord. It's also present in this key in the 4 chord. So which is it? That's the thought process. And we'll talk about how that works, and I'll give you some pointers in going through this in class next week. But again, try to get a head start with this, with the notes, at least with the right hand melody by itself. And then also start to look at what the notes are in the right hand melody so that you can put left hand chords with it. Now, with this example as well, it's 2/4 time, but I'd still like for you to pretend as though you need 2 chords per bar and make your left hand play quarter note chords then twice per measure. So the first couple bars will sound like this, and if you didn't already know, this will tell you exactly what the tune is. And so on and so on. I'm not playing any more than that because I want you to figure out some of the rest of the chords for yourself. And finally, the other thing that we'll do from your textbook, these have been short examples of melodies to harmonize with the left hand, but the piece that we will take a look at is on page 116. So again, this is something we'll spend more time in class looking at together in person, but if you can, please have a look at the notes of this piece called Prelude. It's a short 8-measure piece on page 116. And this one I will play for you just so you can get an idea for what the notes and the rhythms of this piece should sound like. As I'm playing through this, watch your music, see if you can pick out patterns. Are there ideas or rhythmic figures or melodic motives or what have you that are repeated? And are there ways that you could derive clues from that to help you with your note reading? These are things we'll talk about in class next week, but for today I'll leave you with a rendition of this piece on page 116, the Prelude. Sounds like this. So as you've heard me play that, ask yourself, what patterns do I hear? We'll talk about this in class next week. So please get a head start looking at the notes on these couple things. You have plenty to keep you busy, plenty to be practicing at the piano. So please don't neglect your practice time outside of class. And if you have questions about any of these things, please drop me a line and I'll speak to those things as best I'm able. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in class next week, week 5 of the semester. Thanks so much.